Hi Colts, this is Miss Chandler. I'm just going to go through the Readiness Assessment 2. I know some of the teachers might have posted the solutions, but it might be helpful just to have some explanation as we go through them as well. So I'm going to go through each page front and back. I'm going to split them so the video is not too long. So we're going to go through questions number 1 through 7 for this first part. So number 1, the first thing that it's asking is what is the slope m of the graph line. So if we remember, we have 4 different types of slope. We have a slope that goes up or increases, and that's going to be our positive slope. We have a slope that goes down. That's going to be our negative slope. We have a slope that looks just like the one in our graph, and we have one that looks like this. So sometimes we get them a little confused, but if you remember, the slope like the one in our graph is going to be what we call a horizontal slope. And a good way to remember it is if you were to watch the sunrise or the sunset, okay, it is the horizon. And so for this one, it's going to be our horizontal slope. And this one is going to be our vertical slope. So if we had ones that were positive, we would have a positive m. If they were negative, they'd have a negative m. If they were horizontal, if you remember, like an example that we used in class a lot was you could run on that. You can run across something that's flat. It's actually pretty nice to run on, but it's really hard to run on something vertical unless you have something like the Batmobile, right? And you can go straight up and down, or you're Spider-Man. So in this case, our slope of this one is going to be 0. So our slope of a horizontal line is 0, and for vertical lines, if we remember, it is undefined. Okay, we don't have to know where it crosses the y-axis or anything. We're just looking at the slope m. Okay, that's all we have to do for number 1. So on to number 2. For this one, we have to find the slope, but this time they give us, okay, our table or a t-chart or our coordinate plane, okay, or what we could graph on the coordinate plane, excuse me. So first thing we need to look at is we need to look at our x values and see if they increase by 1. So from -1 to 0, it increases by 1. From 0 to 1, it increases by 1. And from 1 to 2, it increases by 1. Which means now we can look at our y values and see if what our slopes are consistently. We don't have to maybe double it or divide it. So if I go from -5 to -3, I'm going to increase by 2. If I go from -3 to -1, I'm going to increase by 2. And if I go from -1 to 1, I'm going to increase by 2. And so for all of these, they are consistent. Now you don't have to just use the table. Some of you might like to graph it. So you can use a piece of graph paper at home, or you can sketch a coordinate plane, and you can plot those points. So you can go -1, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plot a point. 0, -3, plot your next point. 1, -1, 1, -1, and then 2, +1. So as we draw our line here, we see we have a positive slope. So we know that our m should be positive. Now you could have done it using the table or looking at that coordinate plane, but we see that our slope is going to be positive 2. Okay, going on to number 3. Number 3, instead of it being a graph or giving us that values in that chart of our x and y, we are just going to be given 2 points. So again, we don't have a lot of space for this one, but if you wanted to, you could graph it and you can see if it's positive or negative. But I'm going to use it algebraically. So if we remember, our slope is the letter m, and it's going to be rise over run are our words for it. And so if we remember on our graph, rise is when we're talking about our y-axis or our y values. So we're going to start with y2, and we're going to find the difference between y2 and y1. And then on the bottom, or our denominator, we're going to do x2 minus x1. So to help us with that, we're going to go over to our coordinates, and we're going to label them. So let's use a different color. So we'll say blue. So we're going to say this one is x1, and this one is y1. And over here, our second point is going to be x2, y2. And you guys will have a little bit more space if you're doing this on a separate sheet of paper, just to give you some room to work. So as we go through, it's important to use parentheses so that we don't miss any of those negatives. So we're going to go through and we're going to substitute those values. So if I look at my y2, I'm going to have a 3. My y1 is going to be -7. My x2 is going to be -4. And my x1 is going to be 0. So I go through and I'm going to do the algebra. So I have 3 minus a -7. So if we remember, a negative and a negative makes a positive. So I'm going to end up with 3 plus 7 on top, or our numerator. And then I have a -4 minus 0, which isn't going to change it. So it's just going to keep it at -4. So if I combine my 3 and my 7, I'm going to move it over a little bit just so it's not so smushed. I'm going to end up with 10 over negative 4. But if you look at those two numbers, they are both even numbers. So that means 2 goes in both of them, so we need to reduce it. It always helps us to reduce it in case our graph's not super big. Okay, so I know that 2 goes into both of them, so I'm going to chop them both in half. So I know half of 10 is going to be 5, and half of negative 4 is going to be negative 2. So our slope for these 2 points is going to be 5 over negative 2. Okay, now moving on to number 4. This one, there's a couple ways that you can do this one. You can go through and you can graph all of them, and you can see which one's horizontal, but you got to remember what that line means. Okay, you got to remember that horizontal line looks like the horizon. Another way to do it is if you were to take a graph and you were just to sketch it. Let me use an example, or maybe you were watching this and you're just following along. And maybe you did an example here and you drew a horizontal line and you said, all right, I think this is going to be at 4. Okay, so that line crosses at 4. Well, if I looked at any points on this line, okay, that correspond down here, so maybe I'll just put those little tick marks so I could see where these coordinates are. If I were to pick some of these coordinates, I want to see what they have in common, if they have anything in common. So say I pick this one right here. Well, that's 1 to the right and up 4. So this is going to be 1, 4. If I pick another one, I go over here 2, 3, 4, 5, and I pick this coordinate right here, I'm going to end up with 5, 4. Or if I picked this one here, it would be negative 3, 4. So if I look at all those coordinates, I say, okay, what do they all have in common? And their value of y is all the same. So when I'm looking at a horizontal line, I don't have any change in my y values. So now I'm going to go through and look at my coordinates, and I'm going to see if there's any of them that have the same y's. So if I look at 3 and 3, automatically I see, oh, okay, those are both the same. So maybe it's that one. It's possible. So maybe it's that one. But let's check the other ones because it's good to check our work. So I go down to B, and I have 3 and I have 4. Well, if I go from 3 to 4, that means it's not going to be horizontal, so it can't be B. If I look at C, it's going to go from 3 to 4 again. It can't be C. And if I look at D, it's going to go from negative 3 to 3. Okay, so negative 3 would be way down here, positive 3 would be way up here, so it definitely would be a difference in those. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to get the value of A. Okay, if we come over to this one, we get intimidated sometimes because we have words, and so we're like, oh, I'm not sure how to do this one. It's kind of scary. So just go through, and you got to kind of use some of the words that we know represent math symbols. So the first thing is the number y, which sometimes gets confusing because it's letters and numbers, but we're going to talk about y. And that word is equivalent to an equal sign. So we're saying y is 5 times the value of a number x. And so we're going to say it's 5 times our value of x. So if I look now, and it says, we got this other thing, a line graphed in the coordinate plane represents the relationship between x and y. So we're like, okay, but if I go back and I just look and it's asking me what the slope is, if we remember, this is in my y equals mx plus b format, and my value of my m would be 5. And if I were to go further, my value of my b, hopefully we know, is 0 for that one. So we just had to take those words, we had to just write it as an equation. Okay, if I look at number 6, number 6 is which ordered pair gives the coordinates of a point that lie on the line shown in the graph. So this one we just got to plot them all. So I'm going to label them based off of the multiple choice answer. So if I do A, it's 0, 2. So we say, okay, that one doesn't work. If I do C, 2, 0, that one doesn't work. If I do D, 0, negative 2, that one doesn't work. And lastly B, negative 2, 0. And I say, oh, B is on my line. Okay, so a lot of this is just review, just skills that we've done before. Okay, so we're going to go to number 7. Number 7 is really similar to number 2, except this time they want to know the full equation for it. Okay, so finding our slope is a good way to start. So again, I'm going to go here. Okay, this adds 1. On my x values, I go up by 1, and I go up by 1. So now I want to find the change in all of my y's to see if it's consistent. From 5 to 1, I'm going down. And you think, okay, how many spaces? I'm going down 4. So we say, okay, well, let's hope 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Yes, it works. And then negative 3 minus 4 is also negative 7. So I'd see that all of them are decreasing by 4. So I look through and I say, okay, this one's positive 4, so it can't be this one. This one's 1/4, so it can't be this one. This one has a negative 4, so let me check my other one. And then I look at D, this has a negative 1/4, so it can't be this one. And a good way to check for our B value is whatever our 0 is, remember that's our y-intercept, that's going to be our value of B. So in this case it's 1, which matches what we have here. So in this case, we're going to end up with C. Okay, so here's the first 7 questions for our readiness assessment 2. Hope it helps.